Welcome one and all to this week's Síle Show. I'm joined today by one of Ireland's most gifted storytellers, actor, writer and all-round creative powerhouse, Stephen Jones. You'll know Stephen from hit series like Love Hate, Kin and Northern Lights, the acclaimed drama that he both wrote and starred in, recently honoured with not one but 4 IFTA nominations, including Best Drama and Best Script. His work across stage and screen has always balanced grit, humour and heart, a true reflection of Irish life. In July last year, however, Stephen experienced an ischemic stroke at the age of just 38, a life-altering event that reshaped his perspective both personally and creatively. He has spoken with honesty about the hidden challenges of stroke recovery, the emotional and mental battles that often go unseen, and about how that experience has inspired him to develop a new show exploring recovery, resilience, and the will to rebuild. He's also shared how profoundly grateful he is for the support and resources provided by the Irish Heart Foundation, whose work plays a vital role in helping survivors navigate life after stroke. Stephen Jones joins us today to talk about storytelling, survival, and the strength it takes to begin again. Stephen, a warm Síle Show welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here in this great space.
Yeah, great to finally meet you in person. And we've so much ground to cover, but I was going to dive right in at the deep end, if you're okay with that.
Yes.
So, as we said in the intro, you've had a varied lifetime of telling stories and using story as a career and as a person. And then a couple of years ago, you had a very different story unfolding in your own world.
Not even a couple of years ago. I think it's 16 months. It's last July anyway. Yeah. So July 2024, I had an ischemic stroke, aged 38 at the time. Physically, I was kind of as I am now as soon as I got an aspirin in the hospital. But obviously a rake of tests and an MRI showed up that I had a small stroke. Small in the sense of, on the scale of stroke, it was quite small.
Sure. Was it a TIA?
No.
It was an ischemic stroke. It was a brain attack.
Yeah. So, because I thought, because they had said it was a small stroke, and then you're doing what you shouldn't do, you're Googling away while you're in hospital. I thought, I've had what they call a mini stroke or TIA. And I asked that question. They said, no, it is a full stroke. It's just on the smaller side of that. So obviously, like, quite shocking, considering, I didn't have any of, the things that you might look for in terms of, I wasn't a smoker, don't use recreational drugs, didn't drink to excess. My cholesterol was a little bit high, but whose isn't? It wasn't something that on its own they would say, oh. So I had been having 1 or 2 right before the day I had a stroke, kind of aura migraines, which I didn't get often at all. So they were thinking it could be related to that somehow, but they couldn't find an exact cause, which happens in maybe 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 cases of stroke. So unusual. I was coming out of the gym, not that I was super healthy, but I was working out and had never really been sick before, nothing like this, before. So I spent a week in the hospital, but only because I was waiting to have tests done. You have tests to see if you have a small hole in your heart or anything like that, and I didn't. And then I was allowed to go home and put on antiplatelet medication, and kind of told to get back to life, And I was lucky in one sense in that I asked, could I fly? And they said, yeah, no problem. And I flew. My partner's French, and her stepmom had her 60th birthday party, and we went there for the weekend. So even though I was a bit of a nervous wreck, because your world is kind of turned upside down, I was kind of, as my future father-in-law said to me, he said, it is hard. You feel like the hammer is above your head and you're waiting for someone to cut the cord and come down on you. But look, they were very supportive, so I did that, and a week and a half or so after that, I was up in Belfast for 3 weeks filming on the new movie Saipan, which is coming out on New Year's Day, I think. So again, actually acting, once they said action and I was filming scenes, I felt a bit back to myself again. But in between and having to stay in a hotel and be away from my partner, it was quite tough. But then you can pat yourself on the back and say, no, you did it anyway.
Yeah.
So in the last year and a bit, what I've been suffering from post-stroke is kind of post-stroke anxiety and dealing with on an emotional and psychological level, as opposed to, thankfully, physically, if I never told anybody, no one would ever know. So I'm physically pretty much back to 100%.
Amazing.
Apart from a little bit of my thumb, if I press into it. It feels a little bit like pins and needles, but
right.
I don't know. 99% of the time, I don't notice it. So yeah, I'm being monitored on medication. I have a loop recorder implanted in my chest with a battery life of 3 years, just in case they find any abnormal heart rhythm that could have caused it, which might show up only once in a blue moon. So in one sense, I'm walking around on a medication that stops the platelets in my blood clumping together, and I have regular checkups. So in one sense, that's great, and then on the other sense, I'm still dealing with, why did this happen to me? And so it's a battle. It depends how I wake up one morning. Could be full of positivity, and the next day it could be full of dread. Yeah. So that's where I'm at. I've kind of taken a little bit of a break because I was finding being on stage again was a bit too much for me. I was getting dizzy and I was getting, basically panic attacks, I think. Certainly doctors think that. So I've had to do a bit of work on my mental health and realize that it's okay, that it's not a weakness, that it's not something that's wrong with me. Mm-hmm. It's just that I've been through something traumatic and it takes time and work to get back to 100%.
Yeah, and to become the new person that you are now, because it probably isn't about going back to 100% as you knew it before. This is your life now. The story is unfolding differently. That experience can be post-traumatic growth when the time comes.
I think
over a period of time.
It. Yeah, I think I'm learning that lesson only very recently. That I think a lot of people, like stroke survivors, as we say, would have a moment where they go, I just want to be my old self, and I kind of think about it like, well, we're never our old self anyway, time only goes in one direction. And I think I used the analogy before speaking to you privately about the ship of Theseus. The new parts are constantly being built, and so it's never really the same ship. So that's what I'm trying to think. It's not about recovering who I was. It's about embracing, who I am, who I'm going to be, I guess. So it's just a reframing the perception of it, and trying to find gratitude is what I've been trying to do recently. And I said, to myself, that sounds so counterintuitive. How can I be grateful for something that was a really, really tough part of my life? And I go, well, I'm grateful, I'm alive, I'm reasonably healthy, and all the things that decisions I've made post-stroke, I can't say I would have made them. For example, I proposed to my girlfriend, which I assume I would have done at some stage anyway, but maybe there was a little bit more like, this person's so important to me, this is what I want in my life. I can make it happen now, even if it's not the exact right moment in my head. Maybe I would have been a bit too, I got to plan it out more. We were in France, where she's from. It was a weekend. She tried on a ring purely for size, for future reference. And it was one she liked, and she was going to be picky. So I snuck back to that department store and got it and did it that weekend. And I just, in my mind, I'm thinking now, old Stephen wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
So that's just one example of many that I could say, actually, maybe I can see some positives that have come from it,
Yeah, and that's exactly where you needed to be, Stephen. You need to be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you need to be, for starters, and you also need to be able to realise that even to be able to be grateful for being alive is such a beginning step. Lots of people are alive and they can't be grateful for that. They're so stuck in a liminal space. feeling quite depressed and not being grateful to be alive, but wishing if they could only practice gratitude for being alive, they might be on the bottom rung of the ladder towards feeling better. So being grateful for being grateful.
Yeah, and
on the days when you're stuck, that's a great place to start.
It's and it's tough. I'm not walking around now, 24/7, delighted about life and going, "Oh, this was amazing that this happened to me." It's not a thing I'd wish on anybody. But at a certain point in time, I think for me, I have to make a choice in how I'm going to move on from this. I can sit in it and all the negative energy around it, or I can try my best. I'll fail on some days, but I can try to move forward and find positives in the aftermath of it, and what I'm learning about myself, and the people I've met, and maybe we'll talk about the Irish Heart Foundation and the courses that I've done and introduction to things which are probably going to play a big role in my development as a person as I go on. Things like mindfulness and things that I'm incorporating into my daily routines.
Sure.
That I didn't really have before.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a decision to make on how to try and feel about it.
Yeah, and just giving yourself time, allowing yourself this plateau every now and then. Just do less to achieve more when it is a little bit busy in your mind. And that's exactly what you don't want, because the traffic chaos is not a good thing for any of us. But I also think it's really important that we're having this conversation, because you're going to use your platform to help others. But also there'll be times when you'll have to unhook from the responsibility to do that, so that it doesn't become overwhelming.
Yeah,
and that the pattern match isn't live all the time. Yeah,
and I've been learning that as well. I'm learning a lot recently. Because at the start, I think what was going to help me in the early stages of post-stroke recovery was, okay, I'm really going to put this front and center, and I'm going to go out and it was a good thing. I did a couple of fundraisers for the Irish Heart Foundation along with some friends, and I did some interviews about it, but then I kind of felt a bit of a burnout straight from that immediately. And you question yourself as an actor and writer, do I want people to know this? Actually, will there be a perception about me? Stroke is such a powerful word, and people's minds go to a certain image maybe. But again, doing courses with the Irish Heart Foundation, I've kind of learned that it was a good thing for me, but I don't have to do everything. I don't have to be, talking about it when I don't want to talk about it or anything like that. But also I've seen, like, for example, there was somebody who had a friend who heard me do an interview on RTE with Miriam O'Callaghan, and that led her, even though she knew about it, but it led her to find out more about the Irish Heart Foundation and some of the services that they offer. And so, we're in a young stroke survivors WhatsApp group and together. So in my thinking, it was the cliche of if you help one person, then for me it's worth being a bit more public about it. I'm doing some training at the moment to be a volunteer, and it doesn't mean I'll be doing everything. They're very good with, you can pick and choose where your skill set is. Mine, it might be doing some media stuff, or it might be on the phone to people, having a chinwag with people who were where I was, just come out of hospital. Because as great as the doctors and staff in the hospital were, there is an element of, you're okay, here's the medication that you need to take, you'll have a checkup X, Y, and Z, we need a bed, off you go. And you walk out into this new world, confused and alone. And especially if you're, it's hard for everybody, but if you're a younger person where, you're not expecting to be in the age range of stroke, even though it can happen to any age, you sort of feel like you're the only person. So it's good to get a phone call from a volunteer in the Irish Heart Foundation who's been through something similar, and you find out you're not the only one, you're not alone. So that was very important. I
think it's really important for everything to be able to normalise it. I think when you can normalise anything with anybody, you give them hope back. And it's the lack of hope that is such a struggle for people when they're post anything, to remain post that thing, even if it's post addiction. There is a pause after post-addiction state, which can be quite dangerous when you take your attention off the recovery practice just because it's tiresome. And in that space, you could maybe fall victim to your substance of abuse from before, your behaviour abuse before. And so equally for you, you know, you are going to be minding your brain and your thoughts. You're going to be doing this bicep curl for your brain as you do all of these processes, which we chatted about the other day. And I think it would be important maybe to talk about that as well, because that's the brighter side of post-recovery. Because you've accessed a sort of a spiritual sense of self, maybe that wasn't as important for you before. And in my own practice, that's where I see people healing for the long term. And I think it's really important as you are healing and you become post-recovery to know and believe and have hope that there will be a day when you won't think about it. You genuinely will get through the day and it won't have even dawned on you, because you'll be so far past even the experience. You'll be able to put the story down, because everything, even what you've been through medically, is neutral. It's the story you attach to it.
Yeah, and that's it. And I've found that I can see the steps working. I think what happens is with anything that's traumatic in your life, you want it to be fixed and cured and forgotten and over and done with. And actually it's a process like anything. And sometimes, like for example, even on my birthday card on Wednesday, my partner, you know, said she was proud of me. Look how far you've come.
Yeah.
You know, in a year and a bit. And I go, actually, that is true. I've gone from months of this was on my mind every minute of every day. It's still part of my life. It's still on my mind each day, but it's not 24/7. It's not all consuming.
Sure.
And that will continue to diminish, because that's how it works. You know, if you do the work. So I have a little bit more. I'm more settled in the fact that I know, look, I'm not going to be completely over this tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I'm a step closer to being than I was yesterday.
Sure. Yeah. So managing your expectations for yourself as well is really important. If you expect too much of yourself, then you're setting yourself up for failure in terms of that.
Yeah.
If you manage those expectations, you're setting yourself up for success, because like your partner said, and happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
I hope you had a lovely time. As she said, you are amazing. Look where you've come from. You're absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and I've learned that about, because my thing would be, and maybe it's, you know, maybe it's an Irish male thing, I always would have thought, you know, like to be any sort of weakness or vulnerability, that was not a good thing, you know, and that wasn't me. So there's also an acceptance around that that's nothing wrong with going through something like this and feeling the way you feel about it. And I've also learned that actually, you know, I think everyone probably knows this, it's obvious, but it had to be, it has to be pointed out to you sometimes that, you know, that bravery or courage can't exist without fear. Like if you're not, it's not a challenge, you're not afraid. There's nothing to be brave about, you know. So I do try and see it from that side as well. I'm not caught in the trap full time of thinking, you know, you're weak or you're pathetic or, you know, look at you getting emotional about this or anything like that. I know it's part and parcel of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, try not to avoid the things. Like it's simple advice from my doctors, but they were like, go and live your life. And at the time it's quite daunting. You're going, oh God, you know. And especially when I found what's happened to me is, like anybody, I've had moments of bits of anxiety in my life, and you don't really know exactly at the time where it comes from. But for me, it was always around stuff that I thought was the normal place for anxiety. Like in my late 20s, early 30s, I developed a bit of a fear of flying that I never had, and I don't have anymore. But all my anxiety would go into the night before a flight and during a flight and catastrophizing and sweaty palms and heavy breathing and don't show anybody that you're afraid. And, you know, but I thought that's normal because people are afraid of flying. That's a normal thing. But for me, what's happened post-stroke, is that anxiety and that feeling has crept into my safe spaces, you know, being on stage or, you know, attending football matches. And now it doesn't happen every time, But if it does happen, the one thing I knew was that I can't avoid those situations. You know, it's like the person who has a panic attack in a shopping center and then never sets foot in a shopping center again. You know, whereas actually the thing to do is go back into Liffey Valley or the Square or Dundrum, whatever, the next day. So, you know, I'm learning all these things and trying to apply them, and, you know,
Guys, we have had over 500,000 hits in just 2.5 months. We are buzzing and we are so grateful. Now, I'm sure, like me, you know somebody right now who needs to hear what we've just been chatting about. So go on, share it. Consider it like an investment in the emotional bank account in the sky. Keep liking, reviewing, sharing. Let's keep those algorithms rising with us. Remember, subscribing to us is vibing with us. We're manifesting. So jump on, hit subscribe, YouTube, Spotify, surf the moment with us. There's plenty to go around. All you have to do is click that subscribe button, crack open our moment, and make it yours too. This is a really important conversation, Stephen. You're amazing to be wandering into this area, because a lot of people struggle in exactly that way. And the little bit of exposure therapy then is very daunting. And until you hear somebody like you in a space like this, giving it its place in functional living, in functional medicine as such, you often feel that you're broken. One can feel that their brain is broken. We're talking about a brain attack when we talk about stroke. And lots of other people haven't had a medical diagnosis in an allopathic way, but they are feeling very pathological in their life, and they're feeling down and sad. And I meet this so regularly, they have a resistance to living because they're so afraid to push through those pain barriers.
Yeah, I really, I've done a good bit of reading on the subject, you know, and it's kind of like, you know, a lay person, you know, reading about, you know, anxiety and panic and different psychological things, but it does open your eyes up, you know. I mean, I took the train out here today and I was thinking, and in this carriage, everyone seems totally fine. And yet, if we were to have a deep conversation with everybody here, you'd be surprised by the amount of people who are going through something, number one, but maybe even just having those feelings of, you know, anxiety or nervousness or just something going on where they don't feel right, you know. And with me, with having a stroke, what happens then is you know it's a mental thing, because physically you're fine, you can do all the things you did before, but it's like you don't trust your body. It's like, you know, it's like I did speak to a counsellor recently, and I used the word betrayal about my own body, you know, betraying me. And that led us into a conversation about why I, you know, choosing that word and what that means and where else. And so you're kind of going, oh well, maybe there's issues I have around that word and that, you know, that so it's just I'm on a fascinating journey trying to figure all this out, and I just know that I'm not the only person that feels this way, you know. And even in the stroke survivors group that I'm in, a lot of people have a similar experience, and that they find it very hard to explain what's going on with them. You know, if you're not using a cane or in a wheelchair, or your speech isn't affected, then family and friends, even though they can be very supportive, it's hard for them to really grasp what's going on, because it's hard for people to articulate it. I write for a living, and I find it hard to articulate or to talk about exactly what it is.
It's like a disenfranchised grief as well, because you are grieving the freedom that you feel now you previously had, albeit that at the time, if you check back through your journals or that which you were writing and creating at the time, you probably didn't have a huge sense of having a very free life. You probably just didn't have a sense of the antithesis of being free, which now perhaps when you cast back, you feel, gosh, you know, if only I had known how free I was and how healthy I was and how lucky I was.
And there's that, but also for me, there's I've come to recognize that I had issues with anxiety that would crop up a handful of times a year, but because there are only these small moments, I just put it down to, that's just something that's part of it, because I was quite and still am. I'm sort of an adventurous person. Like I'll go and do, like, I mean, you know, my big things in life. I walked the Camino across Spain for a month on my own. I've climbed Kilimanjaro. Like, you know, I go off and see football teams abroad. I went on a football trip around Buenos Aires on my own. Like, you know, so I've no fear of situations like that. But I look back on a diary from a few years ago, before I had a stroke, that I kept when I went interrailing on my own for a month. And it was kind of interrailing at 36, something I should have done in my early 20s, but I said I never did it, so I'm going to do it now. And in that journal I have, like, there's a line one of the days, it was like, bloody anxiety again. So I was obviously walking around just feeling a bit off that day. And that's kind of, that's dotted throughout my my life, even as a extrovert and confident person. So, you know, there's that's another, how I look at it in a positive way, everything that's happened to me. Because again, the other choice is negativity and despair.
Yeah.
The positive side of me goes, well, maybe I had an issue with anxiety stemming back, you know, if I should lie down on this couch now, all the way back to childhood, but it would always be there undealt with until massive crisis in my life. And now I'm learning about it in a way and getting help in a way that actually, it's not just about the stroke, it's about things that preceded it as well.
That's a golden moment. What you've just done there is a golden moment. What you've done for yourself. I hope you catch that now and tap into it. That's phenomenal. Because that is, in essence, probably what is going on here. We can't negate any of the medical diagnoses. And this situation happened without a doubt. But you said it was ischemic, so it was obviously clot related.
Blood clot, yeah.
Yeah, but you were able to, you were in on time within the 6 hours, and you were able to receive the medication. Some people can't, because it's actually dangerous to give the medication outside of a certain period of time.
Yeah, for me it was very quick, and the feeling that I had all down my left, that dissipated pretty much as soon as they gave me an aspirin. So I didn't have to have any clot buster or anything like that, apart from, you know, a regular aspirin someone might take at home. Yeah. So I was very fortunate. And again, it was on the smaller side, so it wasn't even picked up on a CT angiogram that I had. But because I had presented in such a strange manner in my age and everything, they did hang on. And the next day I did an MRI when it was picked up, I
wonder, here's a thought. I wonder, could there have been another day in your life when you'd have been so busy that you would have had maybe symptoms like that and just powered through and not gone to the hospital?
If they were 30% less, maybe. Yeah. The reason I did call an ambulance is because it felt like nothing I'd ever experienced before. And I knew there was something wrong. Yeah. I just knew I knew it wasn't normal. But having said that, I was walking home. I live in the city centre in Dublin. I was walking home from a gym session. Normal day, it was Monday. And I got this jolt down my arm. I tried not to panic. I was like, oh, this is so strange. I registered 2 people ahead of me walking across a bridge and said I might need help from them. I got across a traffic light and I hunkered down in the archway of the Merchant pub. People might know it's near the Brazen Head. Yes. And I took a sip of water, but I felt my lip go numb on my left. And for some reason, I was blood sugar. I went in, I told the woman behind the bar, this is 1:30 in the day, I might need a bit of help. She's like, oh God, are you okay? I said, yeah, I'm just feeling a bit off. Can I have a Coke? And I had a glass of Coke, and the feeling went away completely. So I calmed myself down. She said, are you okay? I said, yeah, I'm grand. She said, are you sure? I said, yeah, I live 2 minutes away. So I walked up the hill. I went in, I had a shower, I lay down, I thought maybe I'm just tired. But it came back with a vengeance all down my left 20 minutes later. So as soon as my lip went numb, I should have rang an ambulance. So that's the lesson. Having said that, when it came back, I rang an ambulance straight away. And I live near James's Hospital. It was very quick. So only that it returned, you know. But look, so again, I count myself as quite lucky. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a fabulous reframe, Stephen. It's so important. And as you're explaining it, it is such an important message for everybody to hear. Fast, as they say, is how we need to respond. And face, arms, speech and time are
the ultimate. That's the benchmark.
Yeah, and it's not always. It's not only just those four. Like what they do is on the phone. They were seeing if I had a mirror near me. I said yeah, because they wanted to. Could I smile?
Yes,
Yeah, my face wasn't drooping. Could I raise my hands up and different things? So I wasn't presenting with classic stroke symptoms. I guess my message, if there is one for people around that, would be, like I said on the phone, something very Irish to the ambulance service. I said, hey, sorry, I think I need an ambulance. Almost like an inconvenience.
Yes,
because there's a party. It's ingrained that it's like I don't want to be, a nuisance, or am I overreacting? I just want to tell people that you're not.
Well
even if it turns out that every test comes back normal, no one in the hospital is ever going to think anything of you for making that phone call. And you do. I've learned that lesson that your health is numero uno.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as you said, the body is giving, it's the data. We're getting the data from our bodies. So we've got to pay attention to, that's the information.
Yeah.
The brain is responding to the body, and of course the body is responding to the brain. But sometimes the servant becomes the master, and that's when we've pushed it too far. When the stress is, but I think it's a significant point to mention that you would have had bouts of anxiety without fear throughout your life. We'll always have anxiety when we're fearful, and that's in the natural order of things. But when we have anxiety without fear, we do need to pay attention to that as well. And journaling, obviously, or you journal, is a really good way of becoming the observer of the problem, not being in the problem. And it's also a really good way of checking back to see how was I feeling at different times in my life. So what are the new procedures and protocols that you're using now in this new iteration of you to keep yourself well, to keep yourself grounded, and to keep putting this down or integrating the experience into your life and hopefully making friends with it and becoming the new you with a positivity rather than... And funny enough, I noticed you as you were chatting, Stephen, saying post-stroke and my stroke. And we chatted about this the other day. I think this is hugely significant. If you can, over a period of time, just gently, when you hear yourself, because remember, words are a wand. And there's magic happening off the end of that wand every time you wave it. So we have a little bit of power with that one.
I was only doing it for the purposes of podcast. I have actually been saying, the event I had or the event I was,
Yeah.
So I've been taking the my stroke possession of it out of my vocabulary, but I put it back in just for people to know what it is.
I understand. But my most important concern is, to me, as we chat here, it's irrelevant that the cameras are on, other than the wonderful work you're doing, because you're pointing out these are touch points that nobody would read on time, but they will hear this when they're out for their walk or when they're training in the gym, and they'll hear it because it's in this long form conversation as well. People love that. They need it. It's easier than reading. We don't have time to sit and read really anymore. We should do, but we don't. So this is a really important way of educating people nowadays. It's the culture of our time, really, is how people are learning. But also, and you're very kind therefore to put it in to make sure that we hit all the touch points. But for you, and you're the most important part in all of this, it will be a gentle release of the need to hold tight to that. And funny enough, the neuromodulators in our brain like to grab a hold of what we've got used to holding. It's an uncanny thing, because usually what we hold tight to in the neuromodulators create a dopamine rush, or they give us that lovely serotonin, or the acetylcholine, or the norepinephrine, anything that we need to focus and to keep moving. And the neuroplasticity of an experience like the one we're chatting about could be one trial learning for you. It could set down some trauma that you might find hard to let go of, oddly.
No, it makes total sense, yeah.
But a little bit like all of the other therapeutic practices that you're doing now, which are so important to help and reinforce the spontaneous recovery that you're so blessed to have experienced. The more you brain train, even like in our conversation the other day and in our chat here today, and every time you give a talk for the benefit of others, remembering that it is brain training too for you. So you have to be able to love you enough to not get so involved in the recovery message for everybody that 5 years or 10 years hence, you're still revolving in the story. There will come a time when it's okay to unhook from that, unless you do a little bit of hypnosis, which we chatted about, which I think we're going to do.
Yeah. I'm so up for that. You know, I had a consultation yesterday with someone who practices EMDR, so I'm going to be giving that a go as well, because I'm open to it, and I kind of understand that I can't, in my brain, I can't charm or talk my way through this. I can't bully my way through this. I can't stubborn my way through this. You know, I have to realize that, as you said, that these things get implanted in there and imprinted in there, and there's ways to connect to them that are not just, you know, me telling myself, look, you know, be strong, be brave. You know,
of course not, because we're responding to programs all the time. 5% of the time we're working out of our neocortex and our thinking brain, and 95% of the time it's the program that's calling the shots. So what we really need to do when we can is get in there and change the program, change the code. So when you do hypnosis, for example, you decode and you recode. That's the magic, actually, is the recoding. Decoding can happen every now and then, even in conversation. You get into flow with somebody and maybe you have a really good convo, and say, for example, you realise, oh yeah, do you know what? I've been inadvertently using that word my, the first person singular. Sure, I don't want to own this. So there's a great little piece of flow state. So you can decode a little bit. Yep. But if you don't recode quite quickly with something else in its stead, your brain will go back to that.
Revert back to it, yeah.
Of course, because it's an energy conservation machine. It's always going to look for the easiest thing. So it's going to put something in place that when you're in neutral, that it will recall for you. So hypnosis is really good for that. It down-regulates emotional arousal, and you'll always have the memory of the thing if you want to recall it, or if you want to use it as a story when you're giving a speech or doing a talk to help other people. Or recanting. Sometimes it's important to recount that time in your life. But when you down-regulate the emotional arousal and still recount, that's your wisdom. It's the memory without the emotional arousal.
Yeah.
And so this can, when you're ready, in your own time, become actually one of the most important thresholds into the next chapter of your life.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I think I can see that, ahead.
Yeah.
But it's obviously doing the work to get there.
Yeah.
But at least it makes sense to me at the moment. It's not where I was when this first happened, where it was like, I'll never be the same. I'll never be who I was. I'll never, this is me now for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
You don't see the progress you can make, you know.
And that you already made. You're amazing.
Yeah.
You're involving, and in all of these lovely therapeutic spaces, and it's an emotional experience that you mightn't have had at this time in your life if you didn't have that portal through which you saw things differently. And okay, that was what called you to EMDR, or perhaps, I think, did you do cognitive behavioural as well? Did you say at one point? Yeah, all of the different things, they're all good. There's no one better than another. And you asked a very important question the other day, and questions are great anyway, because they narrow the focus in our brain when we're responding to somebody who asks us a direct question. The reticular activating system in the nape of your neck will just dial down the noise everywhere else and respond to that direct question, which is great, because there's an element of calm in responding then. So you were asking about, will there be a cross-pollination that may not be good? Yeah. Great question. Amazing question. Even that, you're working to calm that amygdala all the time. Because that's the Tasmanian devil in your head. Yeah. It's the security officer, So you need to put manners on him, and your EMDR will be great for that.
Yeah, I've it's the one word I've read the most in the last 3 or 4 months that I've come across, amygdala, and learned about that little primitive fella.
On both sides.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful thing. Mother Nature gave us that so that we could pick up the fear that we require to keep us safe. In modern day, and previously it was, outrunning the lion. It was the zebra outrunning the lion, and it was very important because as soon as the lion got tired and went in a different direction, the zebra checked back and said, oh yeah, outran that guy, and he's back chewing grass 15 minutes later. But nowadays, it's your mother, it's the bill you can't pay, it's your mother-in-law, it's your boss, it's the deadline for the writing, and it's just chronic. So if we don't have, and stress, that we can mitigate, stress that we can manage, can actually be quite motivational. It can be good. But chronic stress that we can't manage and that's unrelenting, that's what causes the body to become the master. The servant becomes the master. You begin to feel anxiety in your body. And things can happen. It can go from heart to neck to brain. Lots of other reasons as well. But if we can possibly, when we're safe the far side of it, if we can possibly then just see it as an opportunity for post-traumatic growth. Just begin by just even being ready to be ready to be ready. That alone.
Yeah. No,
just believe.
You have to, as you said, take a step back and look at the journey so far for myself, and I can see, actually there's a lot of progress being made there,
Yeah.
And it is fascinating, as you said. It's a lot of things that these are all kind of words and terms and ideas I had a bit of a concept of. My dad was a psychotherapist, but it's, they're there somewhere. I sort of know what they mean, but then actually you go, oh, I haven't a clue, till you start really looking into it. And these are things that I think a lot of the stuff I'm learning about can benefit everybody, or it benefits people who aren't necessarily in the exact same situation as me.
Of course.
So I do see that as, oh well, I wouldn't be growing in this way if it wasn't for that negative experience. So again, it's just framing, and it's just perception, and it's like that thing. I mean, I'm sure you've come across it in practice. Two people could be in a car accident and walk away from it, and one person sees it as being one of those things that happens and gets on with their life, and the other person ends up being, PTSD.
Sure.
Can't watch a car wreck in a film, can't hear a noise of it, So
again, that is so important, and thank you for saying that. That is going to be so helpful to so many people, because even siblings, for example, who go through cancer, and very often there can be a genetic predisposition, and so two people can very unfortunately in a family have a diagnosis, similar, maybe at different times in their lives, but exactly as you say, depending on how they respond to that information, depending on how buffered they are from their psychoeducation throughout their lives, or just because of their own phenotype, just because of how they are as a person and how they lean into it and how they're able to lean into the edges, whereas perhaps the other person isn't. You could have somebody who might even die younger because of the stress post the situation, rather than even the ailment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and what, that's brought up for me that I really want to, I think I probably have already, but really want to make it clear that I'm talking about, in my experience myself. I know that there's people who've had strokes that are in a bad way physically, or have lost their ability to speak. I realize that within that community, if you like, because of my age and because of the nature of my stroke and the size of it, I'm free to sit here physically at 100%, basically, So I do realize that I'm lucky in that sense as well, that I'm not trying to diminish anyone's.
Of course not.
It's not that I'm trying to be so happy-go-lucky about something horrible, but that that's the path I've had to find is to try and find positives that have come from,
of course,
a terrible event.
And everybody's pain is pain. Yeah, it's subjective.
Yeah.
And everybody's response to anything, again, is subjective. So yours is as valid as somebody else's, even if their end result is different from a medical perspective.
Yeah.
But you have found that you're leaning into the bigger truth now as well in the last year or so, leaning into a spiritual side of things and asking questions and becoming aware of source energy and faith practice.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I just turned 40, and I would say for 39 of those years, I was a total atheist, and really big, inspired by the new atheist movement. I have like a framed picture of the English writer Christopher Hitchens on my wall, and it's still a great hero of mine. But it wasn't really directly after my stroke, because I'm aware that people who go through a health issue, can think about mortality a bit more, can think about life and death, can think about God and spirituality and everything else a lot more. But it wasn't straight away for me. It was actually, so I had the stroke in July of last year, and then it was this year around Easter. I don't know what it was. I just heard the resurrection story, which we've all heard a million times, not just at Easter, but just part of who we are, our culture, our world, our stories. I just heard it in a way I'd never heard it before. And again, I became really interested because it seemed so counterintuitive to my thinking before that. It was like my thinking would have been before, well, surely somebody who's been through a stroke would move away from faith rather than move closer to it, because the argument could be, oh, well, why did God let you have a stroke?
Yes, yeah.
But I studied, before I became an actor or writer, I studied history at university. So I started reading into the history of Christianity, and that took me down an interesting path. And then I started going to a group that it's an hour or so every week. I don't go every week, but it was kind of like talks that was using Christianity and faith, but using it in a way for everyday life, talking about anxiety and talking about gratitude. And every time I went, it seemed to fall on a topic that was really, where I was at mentally and emotionally at that week. Mm-hmm. But like the gratitude thing I talked about, that was one I really grappled with, and the group it's called Manifest. It's made up of mostly people from Africa and African Irish people, and yeah, just really interesting about how we can find gratitude in everything.
Of course.
So that was one example. Another example was about anxiety and how faith can help you with that. But yeah, so for me, it's just been really interesting. It's not something I ever thought I would have taken seriously, but I've discovered as well there's more than one truth out there.
For sure.
It's like, along with history, I studied English literature in UCD, and it's like, well, is Hamlet true? It's not true in the same sense that there's a glass of water sitting in front of me there, but it's probably the most truthful statement, or whatever you want to call it, about the human condition that there's ever been. So it got me thinking about bigger truths and look, if it makes you a happier, calmer, less anxious person and better friend and partner, then it's not a bad thing.
I think it's great to believe in. I mean, you follow Shamrock Rovers.
Yeah.
You love football.
Yeah.
To me, that's akin to a faith practice. And I say that with respect to all faith practices.
Yeah.
Because when you believe in your team, as long as you believe adaptively in your team, and I know that you're that type of supporter, it's great. You've got something outside of you to believe in. And it's very healthy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, similarly, a story, whichever one's story is, in terms of faith practice, and whether you go to that meeting or whether you're practicing Roman Catholic or all of, and due respect to all faith practices, then that can be a consideration around being together with other people. So there's lovely connection in that. We've emotional needs that are being met there very inadvertently before you even start to look at what you're going to talk about, the story that's going to be shared. And when people gather together, and particularly if people sing and have motor movement together, there's a syncing of nervous systems. And if those nervous systems are delivering a story that's positive and adaptive and full of hope and full of faith and full of belief in each other and connectivity, and if you can tap into that, that is the place to be.
Oh, 100%. That's exactly it. So yeah, I've found that really an interesting part of the journey as well. Just even to sometimes step back and go, oh, just on. I mean, I write for a living, so I'm always interested in the story of everything.
Yes.
And sometimes I've tried to do that in the past. Was whatever happens to me, good, bad, or ugly, I've always gone, well, look, it's part of a story. It's a narrative here.
Honestly, and when I was rearing my children, I always told them when they had a blip, a hurdle. Sometimes the hurdles were higher than others. And I always said to them, when they would get through it, because sometimes they need you to sit with them in the dark, and sometimes they need you to flip on the light, and you need to know the difference as a mammy, particularly as kids are getting older. But I used to always say, listen, this is the TED Talk in the making. And that was always enough. For some reason, I was so grateful that dawned on me at one point, because as a mammy, you're groping frantically in the dark to say the right thing,
right.
But you can't helicopter in and fix everything. If you try to, prepare the path for the child, they will have anxiety.
Right.
Because I believe everything actually anxiety related all comes down to separation, a sense of separation. I suppose it becomes then that esoteric question again. When we arrive into the world, we arrive perfect, whole and complete. And from the second that we come through that portal, whatever is our vessel of arrival, society will begin to socialise our essence out of us and begin to make us nervous, depending on whatever family we're reared with or school we go to or development we live in.
Yeah.
Friends that we have, the socioeconomic background, that we come up through, will socialise our confidence out of us. And that will affect our self-esteem. Right. So then everything, in my opinion, is actually separation anxiety. Everything. From the tiniest you are to the biggest person you are. And everything that we experience medically is the body keeping score. That's how I look at it. And it's how I work my practice. So in my opinion, we can fix everything. We can get everything that we need in any moment. We just have to get out of our own way. Yeah. And come back to centre. Come back to the wholeness of us. Well, what is the wholeness of us before it was socialised out of us? Or before, we reacted so often that became our set point, as opposed to just responding, even once, differently. If you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. Yeah. We know it. Yeah. So that sense of wholeness and practice that you're referencing when you go to that group, or when you go to follow the football team, or even when you went on the walk. You said you went on your own, but you went on a Camino, so you were part of a company of other people who were heading in the same direction.
Oh yeah. I met people who were all solo travellers as well, and we stuck together and we're a little band of...
Of course, we're pack animals.
Yeah.
We will always seek out other people, our tribe. An interesting thing as well though, Stephen, we'll seek out our tribe, and right now your tribe, for example, is including a group of people that wouldn't have been in your tribe 2 years ago.
Oh yeah, and as I said, I've got the people from the Irish Heart Foundation group, and we do social events and everything else. I have these people mostly from a different background and culture to me. So there's two which I've made friends. I've had really stimulating conversations, reminders that I'm not alone on either of those journeys.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's again part of a story.
For sure. And when the lesson is needed, the teacher will always appear. So if you could even look at that situation in your life 16 months ago as just that, the super classroom of life. And this was the way it downloaded the curriculum to you, because it was downloading it to you in so many other ways, on blue paper, red paper, green paper, through this film, through that relationship, through this situationship, and you weren't listening. Just be curious, bring your curiosity to that space. You were revolving perhaps in the same version of Stephen in a different decade.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
In a different relationship.
Yeah.
In a different job. In a different city. And the universe was saying, hey, we have so much more capacity for you. How are we going to get through to you? We know what we're going to do. Bang.
Yeah, well, that's the version of a story that I hang on to, because I think I was a bit tunnel vision around things that, like when you work in the career I have, it's your freelance. You might have one great year, and then you might have a year where you haven't got, a pot to what in. Said I wouldn't curse. So or a window to throw it out, but so it's but and a lot of this is something for if there's people in the arts out there that are younger than me, please God learn this lesson, that your validation can't come from external sources. It can come from how high up you are on a call sheet. It can't come from your bank account. It can't come from how X, Y, and Z perceive you, your talent as a creative person. And I think for too long that was kind of my life. I was aware of it. That wasn't the be all and end all, but I just think it was too much of my life.
Yeah.
You know, I think it damaged relationships and other elements of my life, because I was so all in.
Yeah, in the hustle.
When you're an actor or a writer or an art, you're in the arts. I mean, you know, you need to be kind of ruthlessly ambitious because it's so difficult, and it's not like a 100-meter race. We don't know who the fastest person is. We don't know who the best actor is, because everyone's talented, but it's subjective, and it's right place and right time and LUCK look, but also how you physically look. There's all these different things. And so what sometimes your great strength in that business can also be to the detriment of other elements of your life.
Yes.
And so for me now, even though I still love it and it's all I really want to do as a job, I sort of know that my health is number one, and that my relationship with my partner and my friends and my family and the things that I enjoy in life.
Sure.
They just have a higher priority than maybe they did before.
Yeah.
Which sounds like I was this narcissistic,
No, not at all.
in my own bubble type of person. I wasn't that, but the balance of my life was weighed in a way which I'm not sure how happy it made me.
I know, and that's okay. Everybody's the same, and it's in our brains. We have almost like a seesaw with a fulcrum point in the center, which throws us from connection to protection all the time, depending on how we're living our lives.
Right.
So what you're really suggesting is, again, so valuable. These are nuggets that are just going to change lives everywhere. So I really commend you, because it's so real and so relatable. When we're in an industry like this, for example, I'm the same myself. You know, you can't survive on past glories, and the past creeps up on you very quickly. You know, the CV becomes very gaping very quickly. You have to do other things to keep yourself real and relevant and current, but more importantly, to find your own pulse. And you have to keep reinventing. So this beautiful portal, because I'm going to really try and work with you to find lots of language, because you're a wordsmith anyway, so that you will have a bank, a thesaurus of words for that event if you need it, that will not be coming next or near the original reference you might have made to it. So out of that space, you're showing up at your life differently. So you'll be able to notice when, for example, you had that experience on stage recently and you just didn't feel yourself. You'll notice the seesaw in my brain now is tipping to protection. I'm feeling I need protection. Where's my connection? The connection really is with self. It's finding home in your own heart, coming home to yourself and feeling safe very quickly in that space. Yeah. So that then in the bigger scheme of things, when you're not on stage and not being spotlighted and needing to get to the end, you can equally access that sense of self and sense of safety and come home to yourself. And really that's what it's all about. It's falling in love with yourself so that you can make those Camino walks, meet other people, and realise that your vibrational offering at a given time is giving you an exact match for where you're at. I always think this is a really important, position. It's like your helicopter view of life. You can climb above you at any time and look down and see, where am I at? Who am I keeping company with? What am I eating, drinking, seeing, listening to, reading? Because that's all information. Yeah. That is literally the data that you're putting into your system. That's forming the code of who you are. So we can change lots of those things. So there's the hope. Yeah, and it's that's it. I mean, and what I learned recently, I had a bad version of a panic attack watching Shamrock Rovers in Prague, and I was with friends, and I think it was, I'd had a few late nights, not alcohol related or anything, but I had a few late nights for different reasons. Here, we had an early flight, didn't eat properly, and then we went out for a few beers that night, and I don't drink much anymore at all, but
you know, it was, you know, lads in their 40s getting away from their kids and for a weekend, and just we went a bit mad, or for midweek. And the next day we did train to Prague, and I wasn't feeling great, so I didn't eat again. So all of a sudden I've had a couple of late nights, I haven't had any proper food, I'm not feeling great anyway. And then all of a sudden I'm at a stadium, and next thing I know, I'm in, I can't see straight, I'm completely dizzy. My friends are panicking because I don't want to let them down, or because I'm around people I know, instead of just trying to sit with it and let it pass, you know, which logically I know that's a technique, flooding, to let it wash over you. Don't fight it. The more you fight it, the more anxiety you cause. No, didn't do that. Did the opposite. Tried to fight it off. Tried to beg it to go away. Panicked about panicking.
Yeah.
Got more dizzy. I'm brought down by, you know, the stewards into a room. I'm hooked up to machines, and my friend who's panicked about me, his heart rate's higher than mine.
Yeah.
Blood pressure's fine. There's a military hospital 5 minutes from here because of your history, because I have it explained for my friends, you know, what medications I'm on and different things, in case anything would happen that I couldn't talk for myself. In this case I could. Went to the hospital to get checked out. Gave me an IV drip because said you might be a bit dehydrated, given, you know, if you haven't eaten. And, you know, sent me home an hour later. Dizziness subsided and I was fine. Missed the football match, which is fine.
Yeah.
But it was that thing of okay, that's not a nice thing to happen to anybody. But what are the lessons that I can learn from it? You know, what did I do wrong in that situation? But also, how quickly could I get back to doing stuff? For example, this weekend just gone, me and one of my friends went to Porto for the weekend to watch some football for my birthday. Because, well, it was a good, you don't need an excuse to go to Porto for a weekend, but we went, and I specifically wanted to go and watch some football there because I wanted to get back into a stadium abroad.
Yeah, well done.
As quickly as possible, to say that, no, look, you're not in a position anymore to go out all night and drink alcohol and have no food and then go to a game, because your anxiety might get on top of you in the situation you're in at the moment.
Yeah.
But the lesson is that it's not the place. It was, you know, so.
I wish we could bottle this conversation, Stephen. Honestly, you have no idea. I don't think you know how valuable the message that you are delivering actually is. You are hitting all of the very, to all intents and purposes, simple things that people have made very complex in their own brains, and that people are hiding and stuffing into their shadow, into their backpack, not sharing. So many people would have experiences like that, and they would power through. But there comes a time, and I think maybe this was because, you know, we're referencing here that we're definitely not trying to downplay the medical seriousness of where you were at.
Yeah, right.
But we are absolutely looking for every way we possibly can to reframe it, because it is now behind you.
Yeah.
And an analogy I use regularly, I think I chatted with you about it the other day, is the windscreen in the car versus the rear view mirror.
Right.
And we look at the ratio of size of one to the other. And we also look at where do we need to be looking?
Yeah.
In front, or we're going to buckle the car.
Yeah.
But we do need to glance every now and then into the rear view mirror.
Yeah.
But equally in, I suppose, akin to the ratio of their size one to the other, we do only just need that glance in the rear view to see how far we've come. But really we need to be looking forward. And it's lovely to just relax into that in a conversation like this, and then check in and see, exactly as you're doing, what are the lessons that I can learn from that?
Yeah, and the reason I bring that story up there is just so people don't think I'm on here saying all the right things, like I'm the finished article after recovering from something like this. I still, you know, I have anxiety about different things, but I'm trying to find the right ways to recognize what it is, why it's there, how to deal with it, so that eventually I always think it's interesting. Why are there days where I catch myself and go, oh, you know, I've just had a day where nothing negative or worrisome or anything like that, anxiety inducing, has been on my mind at all. And there's days where I do the exact same thing and I could be, overcome with it. So it's just a process. So I'm still saying I'm still very much figuring all this out.
Yeah, it is a work in progress. But it's like the lovely story of the two wolves inside all of us. One is fearful and anxious, and can be resentful, and can be annoyed, and can be shamed and shameful, and sad and low and melancholy. And the other is buoyant and happy and resilient and courageous and brave and forever forgiving and compassionate. And two wolves, when they go fighting, which one wins? The one you feed. Right. So it's important for us to realise in those times that there are lessons that are coming through. If we can just realise that we're just, down, like we plug our phone in at night and it gets a software upgrade. We're getting software upgrades all the time. You're a different person now to the person you were before, and a different person every day to the person you were the previous day, which is wonderful. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah. So you're integrating all of that learning into the new you. It's like you've dipped your toes in water to check the temperature, and you've absorbed all of the goodness and the newness of that experience.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I think that's it. That's what I've been figuring out, and that I want. As I said, I wanted the magic bullet. I wanted quick fixes, and then you sort of realize that, like, if you take mindfulness, for example, I've done a couple of courses in mindfulness with the Irish Heart Foundation, and I needed to do a repeat course of it. So I did it the second time to start figuring out, if I set 10 minutes aside a day, and even if my mind wanders all over the place, it's the sitting down for 10 minutes a day to say, I want to try and take, relax, meditate, whatever it is. Even if I get that horrendously wrong and I think about every other thing in the world, that's not what's doing it for me. It's the sitting down for 10 minutes, and all of a sudden I find that my brain will wander less and less, but it's not going to cure me today or tomorrow, but there's a cumulative effect,
of course, that
I won't even realize is happening. And a year from now I'll go, actually I might have a moment where I go, or I might not even register it, where I go, I was using this analogy actually yesterday in the gym, about the gym and about mindfulness, and it probably applies to so many things in our life, like the 4 stages, where you have unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, and then it's
unconscious
competence and conscious competence, or other way around. But so it's it's just so true. I just see it happening in different stages of life, So balancing all that out.
Yeah, and they're all relevant, all of those stages. And we can have, on that particular grid, we can make progress with a certain thing one day, and then we can be, unconsciously incompetent another day again with a different situation. That's actually fine. That's where the learning happens. Yeah. I always used to say that when I was teaching the children how to drive. When you went through the whiplash stage, and it lasted for so long, and they were so unconsciously incompetent for so long, or so you thought, and then they became a little bit more consciously incompetent, where they realised, oh gosh, that was a bit nerve-wracking, wasn't it? And that was where the learning, that's the neuroplasticity. Yeah. It's only in that, it's in the trips and the falls, it's in the fails, that neuroplasticity, this wonderful capacity of the brain to change in response to experience.
Yeah.
Who knew? I mean, there's no medication can beat that. That's your neuropharmacology, and it's available.
Yeah.
And it's phenomenal. And the meditation piece over medication is equally phenomenal. If we can possibly meditate before we medicate, not in your case when you're with your doc, that's a bigger and a different situation. Yeah. But in other ways, like we self-medicate with drink, with ultra-processed food, with cigarettes and vapes, and poor company. Sometimes you keep company with people that are negative and the neggies all the time, and or maybe you jump on board somebody else's story. You narrative tap into somebody else's bad story just because it gives you an excuse to access your rage. Just because.
Oh, look, we all do. I mean, I do a lot because I use social media a good well. I use Instagram, but I find that it's not good for me to spend too much time reading social media stuff about politics or about quote unquote culture wars or anything like that. in one sense, it's good for a writer to know what's happening in the world, but I'm also I get overwhelmed by negativity on there, and
there's a negativity in the information, but there's also a very physical. Your body is doing a really good thing for you when it causes you a sense of what you'll call anxiety. When you've been on your phone for a while, it isn't necessarily even just the content. It isn't even just your sense of annoyance that 5 minutes has become 5 hours, because it is a hold, for your energy and a hold for your time. It is also literally the fact that your neural retina are focusing smaller and smaller and smaller. And ancestrally, the ancestral neural pathway registers, we are focusing on duration, path and outcome here. We must be being chased. Right. So it actually triggers an ancestral pathway of fear and sense of being chased, because you're focusing on this tiny thing. Perhaps if you were looking at a bigger screen or a cinematic wall, it wouldn't be as bad if you're watching the same social media content.
Interesting, yeah.
But the more you narrow your focus, the more your brain, the amygdala, catches a hold of, we've got a narrowed focus. That means we're heading somewhere. There must be, and you're getting annoyed, a bit of adrenaline based on what you're reading as well. So the amygdala isn't the wise owl. The amygdala is the monkey. So the amygdala is doing a really good job for you by saying, right, we know what we need to do here. We need to throw in a tsunami of adrenaline and cortisol, which is that awful sense of disorientation. It's the same as really genuinely being afraid. But if you raise your gaze, the simplest thing, if you raise your gaze even from your phone to the room that you're in, and you get a little bit of a panoramic view, better again, step outside. There's more panoramic view. Better again, walk to the top of a hill near your house if you possibly can, and ideally get to the top of a mountain, which is what you did when you were walking. And you'll actually trigger this when you do your EMDR, because your neural retina moves laterally when you're in that process, and what it's doing is it's effectively putting the amygdala to sleep. It's like tranquilizing the lion for a little while, and it's the same effect as when we're in self-generated forward movement. When we're walking, the neural retina is moving laterally, and that just has a very natural effect of calming the amygdala, so it calms the body. So there's science behind it. It's not just woo-woo. Like, this is all real.
I was listening to a science guy who has a podcast, and quite a big one in America, but that's what he was saying. He was like, as soon as you roll out of bed, actually what I do is I go for a 25-minute walk.
Amazing.
It's just a forward motion first thing in the morning. So I've been trying to do that. And
that
it's amazing
is so helpful. Now you're stacking resources brilliantly there, because the self-generated forward movement is so important. But getting outside within half an hour of getting up is the most important, because your circadian rhythm is naturally being reset there. Well, it'll be ideally reset if you do the same at sundown as well. So if you can get outside to natural daylight within 2 hours of the sun rising, and again bookend your day within 2 hours of the sun setting, for 2 to 10 minutes is all it requires, even on a cloudy day. In fact, probably a little bit more on a cloudy day. But even on a cloudy day, to get out into natural daylight as the sun is rising, you reset your suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master, the Zeitgeber, the master clock. And as you do that, every other cell in your body has a tiny little peripheral clock, and it rejigs. So your body then knows where it is in the 24-hour clock. And that sets up your immune system to work better, your mood to be better. It is that lovely effect on the neuromodulators in your brain that you're looking for. Not the negative one that you might get if you had recreational drugs or drink or whatever. So the stacking of those resources is your wellness guaranteed.
I've plenty of journals at home that are keeping. I take things in if I can write them down. So it's like underlining these things in books, or if I hear something on the podcast, a lot of stop and I need to take that down, and then rereading over them, But putting it into practice. Some of these things sound like the simplest things in the world, but there's times where I get up early anyway, but even still, certain times, it's 7 a.m. or whatever, and you're going, like a 20-minute walk seems like it's a marathon.
I know.
Sometimes, some mornings, but I try and do it. I'm back exercising again, because after something like that event, you think you're afraid of your body. I don't want to trigger anything else. But actually, you know, what am I going to do? Spend the next however long I have left on this planet, you know, taking years off my life by not, you know, doing some exercise. And so I'm going light on that. But yeah, it's all of these simple things add up.
It is. It's a lovely process. And again, it brings us back to that point that it was when you're ready and when the time feels right, you will hopefully receive it into your world. You know, like, you know, I suppose like a baby after incubation period, you'll allow it to birth into your world as a gift, you know, and as something that taught you way more than it took from you. Because if you're out walking, you're 40 now, if you're out walking in the morning and again in the evening, and I presume you've probably paid attention maybe to diet, you're managing stress without a doubt differently. I know you'd like it to be a bit more optimal, but you know, there's good nothing, points. And you know, we can't really, and none of us can optimize systemic function all of the time. We can just do our best with the wisdom and knowledge we have at any given time, but we do need to do that. And sometimes that can actually just be the problem, that we know a lot more than we're actually doing, because knowledge is only any good if you put it into practice, you know. And from a point of view of systems biology, when you're walking, journaling, you know, doing your CBT, going to the gym, chatting with your buddies, taking it easy, but moving your body, you're kind of burning off the toxins, burning off emotionally as well as physically. It can only be good. You know, it's a wonderful process. And you're using the story now, Stephen, to write a new piece. Am I right in saying that you're creating around your knowledge of this in the last year?
Yeah, so the Mill Theatre in Dundrum in the summer put out a call for mid-career playwrights to submit an idea for what they called an evolution bursary, or evolution residency, both. But yeah, evolution was the title of it, and a decent amount of money for a playwright to take time to write, and also resources at the Mill, like a desk space and a budget for workshops and different things. But they wanted a proposal from somebody to write a piece that was kind of outside of the norm of what they normally write about. And I put a proposal together, kind of using my story as a jumping off point to kind of talk about what we've been talking about and recovery as a whole, and try and do it in a creative, theatrical way. So thankfully I was selected as the recipient of the bursary. So yeah, I've been doing some work on that. The idea being that we'll kind of present a reading of it in the spring next year. And yeah, I'm just spending time working with a dramaturg from the Mill about my ideas and how to shape them into something that's a little bit different from my usual style. So it's interesting, like, you know, so who knows what's going to happen. Maybe I think it gives me a chance to talk to people who've recovery could be anything, you know. People are recovering from things all the time, and they're doing it in different ways. And so I'll be kind of talking to different people about their story, and yeah, as I said, just seeing what comes from it, you know. You know,
it's kind of like Reiki in writing, really. What you're doing, you're if you can exorcise the sadness, the melancholy that was trying to catch up on you and grab a hold of you and wrap itself around you as you write it down, you're throwing it down there for the purpose of helping other people. So hopefully there'll come a time when your amygdala will take you seriously when you say, step down, amygdala, I've got this. You know? Yeah. I'm putting this on stage. We're good. You know, settle. And then it really has helped you to evolve into the next iteration of you really healthily, probably in a way that you couldn't have accessed if you tried before.
Well, yeah, from day one, like, you know, I did say about the event that happened to me, that again, lucky it was on the small side, and maybe catching it now saves me a major event 10 years from now, because I'm hopefully on the path to being physically healthier in diet. That was the one thing that was probably not good overall. And that's years of being in the theatre as well, you know. Someone comes in, we go for a pint. If you don't eat at a certain time, you can't eat before the show, and then you're grabbing a pizza or some takeaway stuff at night, and you realise, I've had 4 of them this week, and because I did 10 years in the theatre back to back to back to back non-stop. So not good. So, diet's a bit better, more exercise, mental health.
Yeah.
So all of these things, you're hoping that, and obviously I'm taking a medication to try and stop any blood clots happening. But there's no real side effects in terms of medications. It's not something that's it's not taxing on me.
No,
in
it's
any
not
way.
hardcore.
So who knows? Maybe this has triggered a series of events for the good that stops me, that keeps me here longer.
Yeah.
So.
And I hope that pretty soon you'll take the maybe out of that. I'm going to be keeping you in the light. And in your own time. Yeah. Everything happens in the right time, place and sequence. But I will be holding space. I'll be claiming that one for you. That there'll be a conversation, there'll be a part 2 on the Síle Show. And you'll be saying, and without a doubt, this was sent to save me. And you won't even say, because you've beautifully taken the my out of it. But what I heard there, correct me if I'm wrong, was the thing that happened to me.
Yeah.
So the next level then is that event. And then next level will be not even referencing a focal point. We're all like that though, Stephen. We're all the same when we have to put stuff down.
Right.
There's not a person on the earth that I've ever met, and definitely not in my practice, because if there was, I would be out of business. Not that I do ambulance tracing now. I want people to be well, and it's the best job in the world when you can help people to feel happier. There's nothing greater. But a lot of it is psychoeducation, really, which helps us to remember that actually it's all in our head, in the kindest possible way. We really are the only thinkers in our own brain, and it can very often be a culmination of negative thinking that brings us to a panic attack, or keeping the wrong company, or reading the wrong material, or involving in behaviours that don't grow us, whatever they are, socially and otherwise. That's all the information, it's all the data that we're responding to. So when we respond differently, we get a different outcome. Which is amazing. Yeah. Amazing. So just as a parting word, I think you've spoken to us throughout the interview about the trilogy piece. Without a doubt, live longer. You want your brain span to match your lifespan, and your immune span and health span all to be coupled. Have you a parting word of advice for anybody who has listened to this that hasn't experienced anything medically to be, if you like, the wall they bump into so they change direction, but rather just listening to you? We chatted very briefly before we came on air about something else, and I know there will be a lot of people listening to this, and they'll be tapping in, not at the level of ever having experienced what you experienced physically, but mentally and emotionally. The value of what you've just said is immense. So do you have a parting word for somebody who's struggling to feel happy in themselves, to know their direction, and perhaps, as you said earlier, just struggling with bouts of anxiety and panic attacks, at not really knowing why and not knowing how to saddle up?
Well, I think it's easy for me to say this because I write for a living, and you touched on it as well. I think writing things down, whether it be journaling or having a gratitude journal or whatever people want to call it, is a really useful way of, you might be surprised at what you write about an experience or how you're feeling. That's the first thing. I think you can probably speak to this better than me, but I think people can make a step towards getting some help, which is amazing. Of asking for help or acknowledging that you might need some help in an area is great. But for certain things, for example, talk therapy might not be the answer for one person's problem, it might be for another person's. So it's about kind of trying to explore what the right form of therapy is for you if you're going down that road. Not to be stuck, week in, week out with if it's not getting you anywhere. Let me see.
That's really important. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but that's actually a very important point again, because the stuckness. So for a lot of people, the worst feeling of depression, and perhaps they haven't gone out to try these actionables that you've referenced. They're so cost-free and so available to all of us. And you know, if you haven't tried those, then you're not depressed. You're in a depressive state because you haven't tried those, because we were always intended to be doing those things, moving our bodies and getting fresh air and eating healthily. But I think that stuckness you reference is really important. If anybody feels that tomorrow is going to be the same as today, there's no way they're feeling hope attached to that. Yeah. So if you're feeling stuck, could that be your moment to borrow a brain or to write that, you know, initiate your gratitude journal if you haven't done it before?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's for me, I remember it's so cliche, God. I remember I did the Camino back in 2018, and it was, you know, after a big breakup. But what that did for me was it took me out of a slump. It was a big gesture by me to get me out of a slump. But I found that, okay, actually it really worked for me because I found something in it that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
So, you know, maybe it's writing down 5 things that, you know, you think you would never do. This is not me, but that maybe you have a desire to do. It doesn't have to be something like a Camino. It can be the smallest thing. Something like that, you know. I always think, you know, trying to frame it as being just part of a story, like, you know, that all of the great stories came from someone being in a rut somewhere.
Yeah.
And yeah, like things can look very different a year from now.
That's amazing. Yeah. And to go back, to circle back, I think is a perfect way to bring this gently to a close with my heartfelt gratitude, to circle back to your expression of gratitude at the beginning of the chat where you said, I am grateful to be alive. And I felt like saying, it dawned on me as we chatted, because our nervous systems were syncing at that point. This is what happens when people step into each other's vitality. I felt like saying, and aren't you lucky to be grateful, to be practicing gratitude for being alive? Because a lot of people aren't. So on that note, I think, Stephen, what you've done is invaluable in the conversation. I don't know if you realise how deep you went in that conversation. I hope you're okay after it. We'll have a chat out and make sure you're okay, because it is so relatable. It's so important. It's so helpful. And really and truly, it's the most important. It is the reason we're here. Our raison d'etre is really to enjoy this journey, to find a sense of settlement in our own hearts, to be able to come home to self, to fall in love with self, not to feel separated from the oneness from whence we hail. However we practice that, returning to a sense of oneness in small ways and big ways, so that when we put our heads down at night, we feel that we've had a good day and we look forward to a different good day the next day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And hanging on to our health and wellness that way. Thank you so much, Stephen. This has been an absolute joy. I actually hope there'll be a part 2. If at some stage next year, when you've the creative piece written.
Do it. That's great. Thanks a million.
Thank you so much. And there you have it. From love, hate and kin to Northern Lights. Stephen Jones has built a career from story. Our chat today was a story of recovery, of rediscovery, and of what happens when life stops you in your tracks and your only role is to begin again. When Stephen suffered an ischemic stroke at just 38 years of age, the script was rewritten in real time. All he could focus on was healing, breath by breath, moment by moment. But through that process came a profound awareness that recovery isn't only physical, it's emotional and spiritual as much as it is cellular. Embracing what has happened as an invitation rather than a sentence, Stephen is, amongst other things, using his learnings as a framework for new creation, a reminder that even in rupture, there is renewal. And in science, we know this too. The brain, this extraordinary living network, is constantly rewiring itself through neuroplasticity. Our neuromodulators, dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, adrenaline, they all shift and dance in response to how we live, how we think, and of course, how we love. Every emotional surge, every creative spark, every pulse for stillness, It all changes the architecture of who we are. Sometimes those shifts are adaptive, but sometimes they're not. The small T traumas, the big T traumas, they can become our new set point. But awareness gives us agency. And if we can move the fulcrum point on that inner seesaw from protection back to connection, we create space for healing so that when anxiety does show up, we can meet it without fear. We can name it, breathe through it, and choose a different response. We can use our words as a wand to reframe, to reimagine, to restore, because our brains, our bodies, and our stories are all capable of change. We learned in today's conversation that it's very wise to pay loving, informed attention to the signals and to the whispers of our biology, because inside them lies the potential to repotentiate our DNA, to rewrite our own code for balance, clarity, and vitality. So guys, what's your task for this week? Look at the systems that make you, you. Think of your life through the lens of systems biology, the mind, the body, the environment, all speaking to one another. Notice where the feedback loops serve you and where they might need a little recalibration. Every moment of awareness is a chance to reshape your neurocircuitry to engage neuroplasticity consciously. You can change everything. You can access everything. And sometimes all it takes is one mindful minute. But the scaffolding does matter. We need to support the system that supports us. So what are we going to do? Nourish your body with real food. Move with intention. Honour your sleep. Manage stress as much as you can. Keep your brain curious and flexible. Detox from what dulls your spark. And when it feels right, take targeted supplements if you need to, but more importantly, supplement your life, not to escape it, but to enhance it. Because change isn't abstract, it's biochemical, emotional, and artistic. And the more we live in alignment with that very truth, the more possible everything becomes. And so it is.